our correspondent James André. Great to talk to you, James. Tell us what's been happening there today.
Good evening. Well, what we've seen today in Damascus are mass demonstrations of joy, if you will, simply because people are very happy that the Assad regime has fallen. And it was the first Friday, as you know, in the Muslim world, the Friday is prayer day. And, well, just after the prayer, well, everybody gathered at the Umayyad Square, and there was a huge, huge crowd. Tens of thousands of people honking horns, waving the new three-star flag of Syria, because those flags are now everywhere in town. You don't see the two-star flag anymore. They have mostly been replaced. And what we are seeing is really an atmosphere of people celebrating this newfound possibility of just simply walking around and enjoying themselves. It was interesting. I was speaking to a young man today at that demonstration. He was telling me that he hated his country last week. These were his exact words. And he said, you know, I've worked hard. I managed to get a grant and to have to go and do an MBA in the UK next year. And I know I'm thinking of cancelling. I really want to be here in my home country. So that gives you a sense of how happy people are. And you can understand that when indeed you realize how tough conditions were and how little freedom people indeed had under the Assad regime. Now, this week, with my two colleagues, Julie Dangelov and Sofia Amara, we worked and went to meet the prisoners who had come out of the prisons here in Syria, who had been released, basically, when these prisons were conquered by the rebellion. And we met them at a hospital where they were being cared for. These people have literally been through hell in Bashar al-Assad's prison system. This is a report we produced about these people and about this carceral system. You can watch.
Since the gates of Assad's prisons have burst open, hospitals are flooded with ex-captives and families desperately searching for loved ones. Said Naya, often described as Bashar al-Assad's death camp. The man doesn't answer. He hasn't spoken since his release. Many here appear completely lost and distraught. This woman repeats the same sentence over and over.
من حمص الأصل الشاب من حمص تمام فنحن عم نقلكم ومسجون وين؟ مسجون بعدرا
والله تعبنا لا أكل لا شرب ولا شيء العذاب النفسي أصعب من عذاب الأكل والشرب والإهانة أنا عمري 56 سنة ما في احترام ما في أي شيء بزتونا ذات مثل الكلاب.
The ward is soon submerged with families searching for missing relatives.
أخذوهم بال2013
نحكي عن 11 سنة
من 2012
ما بنعرف بالسباط أخذوهم ب13 سباط
كم أعمارهم؟
ما بنلاقيهم ما خلينا
سوونا
نفسه ولا لا؟
يشبهوا
هي أقرب يا عمي.
These two men argue over a young man, both convinced they found a family member.
شو اسمه؟
يلا
Long detention and harsh treatment have made prisoners difficult to recognize.
لك لا يا أخي قد إيه صار له أنت مسجون ابنك؟
من 2013
هذا من 2015 عمي مسجون.
هذيك أقرب هذيك
أنا أقرب.
One of the men calls the wife of his relative to confirm. She doesn't recognize him and starts searching for a large scar on his wrists. This is not her husband. The other family did not convince the hospital either. This survivor's identity remains a mystery.
To understand how these prisoners found themselves in such a state of physical and psychological shock, we decided to visit the Palestine Detention Centre in central Damascus.
Far Palestine, also known as Branch 235, is the state security HQ for Damascus. Underneath lies a sprawling prison complex. Guards set fire to the archives as they fled to cover up decades of torture.
One of the inmates explained that the guards would bring people up from the basement to torture them here. Look. In the light, these are handcuffs. They used them to hang the prisoners so that their toes could just barely touch the ground. These ropes were used to tie them. They told us they were left there for 8 to 10 hours with nothing to eat or drink until they passed out. Then they'd take them back down to their cell.
This rebel fighter was part of the group that took control of the center and opened the cells. We descend into a vast underground maze with him. He visits with Samir, who wants to see where his family was locked up and tortured.
These are the common cells. It was crammed full, you couldn't walk in it.
Samir slowly realizes the horror 9 of his direct family members faced here. Women were also locked up, sometimes with their children, and abused.
When we arrived at the Palestine branch, there was a woman here. She was probably 45, but looked much older. We forced the lock of her cell to free her, but she thought we'd come to punish her, so she was afraid. I said, "Please, madam, come out. We're rebels, we've freed the country." She replied, "I swear I didn't do anything, sir." "Come, look inside." She had to relieve herself there, and she used this to eat.
This is where my mother was locked up, one of these tiny cells. My sister, my uncle, and his family were here. They were tortured. They suffered a lot during their detention. They accused my uncle of helping the Free Syrian Army. They took the whole family. I was alone in Homs and could flee to Lebanon. Then they came to the house and took the women and young men, and they left the 9 kids by themselves in the house. The youngest was 9 months old.
The terror sown into society by the Assad's gruesome prison system was the cornerstone of a dictatorship that lasted for over half a century.